Alright, so CJ Stroud is already showing why he was the second overall pick of the draft. The Texans just capped off an upset win over the Jaguars, and the future's looking pretty bright in Houston. Stroud has easily been the best rookie quarterback through the first couple of weeks of the regular season. I mean, he still hasn't even thrown an interception and already has over 900 yards and 4 touchdowns in 3 games. CJ Stroud is something special, and frankly, this is only really the beginning for him. The Jaguars came into this season with some pretty high expectations. They got hot late last year and ended up winning a playoff game in January, which was that crazy 27-point comeback game against the Chargers. Trevor Lawrence improved a lot, and Jacksonville was supposed to be good this season, but the Texans ended up dogging them in week 3. They thoroughly dominated the entire game. Houston led 17-0 at the half, and the Jags did try to claw back, but they just couldn't. They made it a one-score game, but Houston just wouldn't go away. They won 37-17 and definitely made a statement. I was watching the game, and once Houston jumped out to a 14-0 lead, it really started to feel like the Texans were just gonna pull away with it, and they did. To already have such a big victory and confidence booster this early in the season is just awesome for Houston and CJ Stroud. He looked great in the game. He threw for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns and completed 2/3 of his passes. Add in that it was his first career game without a turnover, and you gotta feel pretty good if you're a Texans fan. Also, Tank Dell had a day, 145 yards and a touchdown on 5 receptions. There's another rookie making an impact for the Texans. He was a 3rd rounder out of Houston and already has 250 yards in 3 games. Of course though, the rookie that everyone has their eyes on in Houston is CJ Stroud, and he's been pretty damn good so far. CJ Stroud made his NFL debut at the Ravens in week 1. It was a pretty ugly game for the Texans. I mean, they didn't score a touchdown and got blown out 25-9. So it was pretty damn ugly. Stroud for sure had his welcome to the NFL moments, but he had an iconic first career pass where Roquan Smith tipped the pass in the air and Stroud ended up catching it. So technically, CJ Stroud caught his own first career pass. Now, that's definitely rare, but it has happened before. The other being Brett Favre. Safe to say that Stroud's in some good company there. It goes without saying that Baltimore is a lot more talented than Houston. The Ravens are a legitimate playoff team. Meanwhile, the Texans have a not that great roster. They probably didn't stand much of a chance, but there were a lot of good things to build on. It was 7-6 at the half, but then the Ravens just pulled away. Stroud did get strip sacked, but overall showed some promise and got some experience. Stroud threw 44 passes, completing 28 for 242 yards. No touchdown, but he also didn't throw a pick and he rushed for 20 yards. Stroud didn't have a receiver get to 100 yards in week 1, but it's safe to say that things probably are turning around because Tank Dell just had a big game this week, and then Nico Collins had 146 yards in week 2. CJ Stroud ended up playing pretty well in his first home game. It was against the Colts, and Indianapolis did win 31-20. It was supposed to be Anthony Richardson against CJ Stroud, but instead Richardson suffered a concussion and Gardner Minshew played pretty well. The Richardson injury definitely took away some of the fun of the game, but Stroud looked good though. He went 30 of 47 for 384 yards and 2 touchdowns. Again, he didn't throw an interception, but he did fumble twice and lost one of them. The ball security is very much a rookie growing pain. Hopefully that'll clear up eventually, but Stroud looks good passing. He's performed the best of the rookie quarterbacks and really solidified himself in week 3. But I do have to say, it doesn't help that Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson didn't even play this week. It's really no secret that the Texans are a really young team, but the rookies that they drafted are already making an impact, especially on offense. CJ Stroud has been impressive. There was that period in the offseason where Stroud was considered the top prospect over Bryce Young. Ultimately, Young was just more polished, but Stroud has the higher ceiling, I think. It may not be as high as Anthony Richardson's, but Stroud has the tools to be a really good NFL quarterback. He's already looked very pro-ready and grounded. Obviously, he still has his rookie growing pains and has some goofy plays, but for the most part, it's been pretty promising. Honestly, I feel like he's on the fast track to winning Offensive Rookie of the Year already. Either way, the Texans aren't going to win much this season, but this season is all about the future for Houston. Tank Dell was talked about a lot in the preseason for his play, and he's already backed it up in the regular season. He didn't do a lot in week 1, but then he had 7 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown in week 2. This really isn't anything new for Tank. He was electric in his last 2 seasons at Houston. I'm not too surprised to see him having a ton of success in the league already, and it's just so cool that the Texans drafted him after he played at Houston. The other Texans rookie starter is Will Anderson, he may have legitimately been the most talented player in the entire draft. The Texans traded up to get him at 3 and had to give up their 2024 first. Through 3 games, he has 13 tackles and a single sack that came back in week 1. It's been a bit of a slow start for Anderson, but he has the talent to eventually be a game breaker for sure. And if he's not, then the Texans royally screwed up, because that's probably going to be a very valuable first rounder. If you're a Texans fan, I think you have to feel pretty good about how the DeMeco Ryans era has started. Even at just 1-2, the Texans have fought super hard, and it's going to be interesting to see just how they fare for the rest of the season. Now, the Texans still aren't a very good team. That's just the harsh reality. But they do have a chance to actually win some games this season. 6 games are against the AFC South, which looks like a really weak division. Then they play the entire NFC South. Next week, Houston plays Pittsburgh, who hasn't really looked too good, so there's a very real possibility that they could even win at home. But then they literally have to play the entire NFC South in 5 weeks with a bye in the middle. At Falcons, Saints, at Panthers, and Buccaneers. If there's gonna be a division worse than the AFC South, it's probably gonna be the NFC South. So the good news, there's a lot of opportunities to win in that stretch. They play the Bengals in week 10, but after that, the schedule doesn't feel very daunting. They get the Cardinals, Jaguars, and Broncos in 3 straight home games, and Arizona and Denver are just hard to watch this season, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans are even favored in those games. Then they visit the Jets, and who really knows who'll be playing quarterback at that point. Then to close out the season, at Tennessee, Cleveland, Tennessee at home, and at the Colts. That could be a really important stretch for the division title. The Colts are the only 2-1 or better team in the AFC South right now, and if the Jaguars can't turn it around, really anyone in that division could squeeze in. This is a very important season for the Texans, and what makes it successful or not really isn't whether or not they make the playoffs. Of course, sure, that would help, but it's really about the growth of the team. The development of CJ Stroud is the #1 priority for Houston right now. You used a 2nd overall pick on this guy, and you seem to believe that he could be your future. I definitely think he will be, and he's already shown some of those signs. So let him continue to learn, and next offseason, just keep building around him. It's not just a big year for Stroud either. You also need to find out if DeMeco Ryans is the answer at head coach. Now, he's a fan favorite, so he should at least have a very long leash, but that doesn't necessarily mean he should though. If you look around the league at the best teams, most have an offensive-minded head coach. DeMeco is a defensive guy, and that's what makes Bobby Slowick even more important. He's a Texans offensive coordinator and is going to have a massive role in the development of Stroud. This is really a figure-it-out year for the Texans. It's really too early to know anything concrete, but CJ Stroud is a promising young quarterback, and it feels like Houston really is on the rise. But it is a rebuild, so it's going to take time, and there's going to be plenty of bad this season. But the Texans seem to be building right now for their future, and CJ Stroud is really all that matters.